In our headlines on this Tuesday afternoon, May 21st, here in Korea. Efforts are underway to set up guardrails to effectively address the risks of artificial intelligence while advancing innovation and inclusivity for the broader international community. Meanwhile, the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court is seeking arrest warrants for the leaders of Israel and Hamas over alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. Staying in the Middle East, Iran is mourning the death of its leader Ibrahim Raisi, whose helicopter crashed amid adverse weather conditions this past weekend. The AI Seoul Summit kicks off today with a virtual leaders session to be co-chaired by President Yoon Suk-yeol and his British counterpart Rishi Sunak this evening, Korea Standard Time. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
The leaders of South Korea and Britain are leading the global conversation on how artificial intelligence should be governed across the world to ensure that digital progress changes lives for the better. Yoon Suk-yeol and Rishi Sunak on Tuesday evening's Seoul time are co-hosting the AI Seoul Summit, launching the virtual top-level talks where the leaders of the Group of 7 nations, Singapore and Australia, have been invited to participate, along with the heads of international organizations and global tech firms like Samsung, Amazon, Google and OpenAI. The AI Seoul Summit is a follow-up to the AI Safety Summit held in the UK's Bletchley Park last year, which saw a world-first agreement between governments to jointly address the risks posed by the fast-evolving technology. This year, the focus will expand to measures to promote innovation, as well as the safety and inclusion of diverse social groups and the Global South.
Participants will hold a balanced discussion on not only the risks posed by AI, but also its positive aspects and how AI can contribute to humanity.
Ahead of the summit, Yoon and Sunak on Monday published a joint op-ed emphasizing the need for standards on AI to harness its full potential to tackle global challenges such as poverty and climate change and prevent a global race to the bottom. President Yoon, beginning with his New York initiative in 2022, has actively promoted global efforts to form standards on advancing digital innovation for the benefit of humanity, while expanding access and rights to gain from technology.
Korea is a powerhouse for AI memory chips, but the UK is third in the world in AI, so we have really advanced AI capabilities. So we have really complementing strengths there. But what's most important is that the UK and Korea are like-minded partners with shared values. So it's really important for us to work together to ensure that technologies are developed, governed and deployed in ways that uphold democratic values and protect human rights. Because it's only when we get that right can we really harness safely the potential of these technologies, which can help us solve global challenges like climate change. But we have to get.
A South Korean presidential official said, while China hasn't been invited to the Leaders' Summit, it has agreed to participate in a ministerial meeting, noting that Beijing did not take part in the more sensitive discussions last year. The official said while many countries agree on the need for AI norms, there are some differences in their approaches given their different forms of governance. These contrasts will likely be discussed in detail during the summit. The Leaders' Summit will be followed by an in-person ministerial conference on Wednesday, alongside the AI Global Forum in Seoul, to expand the conversation to wider sectors of society. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Unification Minister Kim Yong-ho says North Korea has rebranded a key agency in charge of inter-Korean affairs. Our correspondent Kim Jong-shil covers this event and its broader implications.
Unification Minister Kim Yong-ho revealed new findings on North Korea while reaffirming Seoul's policy against the regime in a press conference on Monday.
The North hasn't announced it yet, but its United Front Department has renamed the Workers' Party's Central Committee Bureau 10, and its functions have been centralized on psychological warfare.
North Korea's United Front Department served as the counterpart to South Korea's Ministry of Unification. A senior ministry official said the change means Pyongyang is now only focusing on espionage against the South and not efforts related to reunification. Other experts said it was notable that the North had decided to keep the department intact, although under a different name. When asked about former President Moon Jae-in's recent memoir in which he wrote he trusted Kim Jong-un's sincerity, that he has no intention of using nuclear weapons, the minister responded as follows.
What's most important is to read our counterparts' intention and capability. North Korea has the capability to threaten us through its nuclear and missile development. If we only focus on its intention while overlooking its ability, this could lead to a misjudgment of the state.
He said one of the toughest challenges remaining was Pyongyang's refusal to engage in dialogue.
The inter-Korean communication channel should resume regardless of the political and military situation, at least for humanitarian purposes and disaster response measures. It's urgent to restore such channels ahead of the monsoon season.
The minister plans to visit Seonyu-do Beach this Friday along with U.S. Special Envoy Julie Turner, where 16-year-old Kim Young-nam was abducted by the North in 1978 to raise awareness of the issue. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Earlier on this Tuesday morning here in Seoul, relevant authorities here and those from the U.S. began their second session of talks on defense cost sharing. The three-day discussion is being led by Korea's chief negotiator from the Foreign Ministry, Lee Tae-woo, and his American counterpart, Linda Specht. The talks will determine South Korea's share of the cost of maintaining some 28,500 U.S. soldiers in the country starting 2026. The first session of the talks took place in Hawaii last month, and the current agreement signed back in the year 2021 is set to expire at the end of 2025. Meanwhile, top defense officials from Seoul and Tokyo may sit down for some crucial talks in Singapore on the sidelines of an annual security summit late next week. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung explains.
A Japanese national newspaper has hinted that South Korea and Japan will soon resume bilateral defense exchanges, which have been on hold since the 2018 patrol aircraft dispute. Yomiuri Shimbun on Monday reported that the defense ministers of the two sides are expected to meet on the sidelines of the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore at the end of the month, where they're expected to hold talks and exchange documents on preventing a recurrence. The dispute flared up in December 2018 when a Japanese maritime patrol aircraft flew at an unusually low altitude over a South Korean warship. Tokyo, on the other hand, accused the South Korean vessel of blocking its fire control radar. Talks have been suspended since 2019. South Korea's defense ministry confirmed that the two sides are currently in talks.
South Korea and Japan already confirmed their positions last year regarding this issue and decided to prepare measures to prevent a recurrence from a future-oriented perspective. We are closely cooperating with Japan.
Japan's media has acknowledged that the incident has been the biggest barrier between the defense authorities of Seoul and Tokyo and turned the spotlight on whether the resumption of defense exchanges will serve as an opportunity to rebuild trust between the two sides. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The cabinet here has recommended a presidential veto of a parliamentary bill seeking a special probe into the death of a Marine during a search and rescue operation following heavy rain last year. During a cabinet meeting on this Tuesday, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo claimed the bill was railroaded by the opposition Democratic Party. President Yoon Suk-yeol, for his part, had previously hinted at vetoing the bill, asserting that he would await the results of the current investigation by police officers and corruption investigation authorities. All opposition parties have urged the president to pass the bill. He has until Wednesday to make his decision. In other news, the government's request for the return of doctors in training to their respective hospitals appears to have fallen on deaf ears. Yesterday, that is Monday, marked 3 months of collective action by some 12,000 doctors in training in protest of plans to raise medical school admissions quota. Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong earlier pointed out that the current law stipulates doctors in training are permitted a maximum of 3 months of absence and that a prolonged absence from hospitals may hamper their qualifications for next year's specialist examinations. Trainee doctors began their walkout in late February. Korea Korea's chips continue to fuel its exports. According to the Korea Customs Service on this Tuesday, exports during the first 20 days of May rose 1.5% on year, amounting to over $32.7 billion. Shipments of semiconductors soared over 45% during this period. Pundits believe exports may see 8 straight months of on-year expansion in May. Beyond borders, the prosecution team of the International Criminal Court has called for the arrests of Israeli and Hamas leaders over alleged war crimes and more. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
With thousands of civilians dead since the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, the International Criminal Court is now seeking arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Hamas's leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar. According to the ICC's chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, on Monday, the court is seeking warrants for both men on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity over the October 7th attacks on Israel and the subsequent war in Gaza. 2 other Hamas leaders are set to be subject to the warrant, while Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant's arrest warrant is also being sought by the prosecution. The Israeli Prime Minister slammed the court's decision to issue the arrest warrant against him, calling it absurd, adding that the move was meant to target all of Israel.
The absurd and deceitful warrant of the prosecutor in The Hague is aimed not only against Israel's Prime Minister and Defense Minister, it is aimed against the entire state of Israel. It is aimed against the IDF soldiers who are fighting with the utmost bravery against the vile murderers of Hamas who attacked us with horrendous brutality on October 7th.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden also criticized the ICC's decision, calling it outrageous that it's seeking to arrest Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders. He stressed that there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. Pundits say that while it's unlikely that the Israeli and Hamas leaders will actually face prosecution, the arrest warrant could make it difficult for them to travel overseas, while a trial in the court would be especially embarrassing for the Israeli government. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Iran, meanwhile, is observing 5 days of national mourning this week following the untimely passing of its leader Ibrahim Raisi in a helicopter accident back on Sunday. Our Shin Se-byuk has the latest.
Iran declared a 5-day national mourning period on Monday following the death of President Ibrahim Raisi in a helicopter crash. Mourners filled the streets in major cities, including the capital Tehran, with memorial prayer gatherings held in various squares, creating a somber atmosphere.
Well, we are all sad about this news. He was a president of the people, and we lost a president who worked tirelessly for our nation.
President Ibrahim Raisi and 8 others, including his foreign minister, were aboard a helicopter that crashed on Sunday. The wreckage was found on Monday in a mountainous region of northwest Iran. Iran's state-run IRNA news agency reported on the same day that the helicopter crashed due to a technical failure. The helicopter was an American-made Bell 212, which, according to CNN, is an outdated model introduced decades ago. Multiple media outlets also reported that Iran has struggled to procure helicopter parts due to international sanctions. Previously, severe weather conditions were blamed for the crash. President Raisi's funeral will be held on May 22nd in Tehran. Meanwhile, the Iranian government said a presidential election will be held on June 28th in accordance with constitutional provisions. The Iranian constitution mandates that in the event of a presidential vacancy, a direct election for a new president must be held within 50 days. Until the new president is elected, First Vice President Mohammad Moghbir will serve as acting president. In response to Raisi's death, the U.S. on Monday issued an official statement through the State Department expressing condolences for the death of President Ibrahim Raisi, his foreign minister, and others in the helicopter crash in northwest Iran. However, Washington also said hardliner Raisi had, quote, blood on his hands, pointing to Iran's support for terrorist groups as well as human rights abuses in the country, while making it clear that the U.S. had no involvement in the crash. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
In sports news, Korea's judo star Ho Mimi clinched gold at this year's Abu Dhabi World Championships. The 21-year-old claimed victory in the women's 57-kilogram class final. She defeated world number 1 Krista Deguchi from Canada in a tough match that ended when Deguchi was penalized for non-combativity in overtime. Ho now stands as the first South Korean judo world champion in 6 years and the first female South Korean to take the title since 1995. The 2024 World Judo Championships is currently taking place at the UAE until May 24th. The government here has highlighted the importance of tackling trauma to ensure psychological healing from shocking experiences. Our Yoon-jin explains.
As well as injuries, deaths, and destruction, major disasters and crises cause damage to mental health. This is often overlooked because there are no visible injuries, but the impact of trauma on mental health can severely affect one's daily life.
There may be signs of sensitive reactions like anxiety or depression, also habits of avoiding situations related to the traumatic incident, or being intimidated by interpersonal relationships.
What is needed in this situation is emergency psychological support. This is carried out in 3 stages: looking, listening, and connecting. First, we need to be on the lookout for anybody in extreme pain or stress. Trained counselors listen to their stories and then connect them with professionals or institutions that can help. But the victims should not be forced to talk about their trauma, and using negative expressions can only worsen the situation. Promises that cannot be kept should also not be made.
Trust is a crucial element. When one experiences the crisis of their daily life breaking down, they may quickly lose trust in themselves, others, and the world.
The National Center for Disaster and Trauma offers training for psychological emergency response in cases of disaster and trauma. It also operates a safe bus that allows mental health counseling directly at the site of the disaster. Experts in mental health say that emergency psychological support doesn't have to come from professionals, and that in such situations, it is more important that the victims stay connected. Yoon-jin, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. Following the inauguration of Taiwan's new president, Lai Ching-te, Beijing's foreign ministry reacted on Monday, saying that Taiwan independence is a dead end and that succession is doomed to fail. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said in a news conference following Lai's inauguration that Taiwan's independence will fail no matter under what guise or what banner. Chen Binhua, a spokesperson for Beijing's State Council Taiwan Affairs Office, said that Taiwan's Lai sent a dangerous signal of seeking Taiwan independence in his inauguration speech. Chen firmly added that China will never tolerate any Taiwan independence separatist acts in any form. The newly inaugurated president of Taiwan, 64-year-old Lai Ching-te, asked China in his inauguration speech to stop its military and political threats, saying that Beijing had to peacefully respect the choice of the Taiwanese people. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been granted permission to appeal his extradition to the United States. The UK High Court ruled in the whistleblower's favour on Monday, meaning Assange will now be able to appeal the US assurances over how his US trial would be conducted and whether his right to free speech would be infringed. In court, 2 judges said that they've granted full appeal to Assange on the basis that he might be discriminated against in US legal proceedings, as the Australian-born WikiLeaks founder is a foreign national. Assange has been resisting extradition from the UK for over a decade after his WikiLeaks website leaked confidential US documents in 2010 and 2011 on the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, among others, for which the US charged him with acts of espionage. After the court case, his wife, Stella Assange, said that now is the right moment for US to drop the case. Italy's presidential estate in Rome marked World Bee Day 2024 on Monday, with a celebration following this year's theme, Be Engage with Youth. The Director General of the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization spoke at the event saying that young people should learn more about bees and pollinators, including modern technologies, while emphasizing the vital role of bees in agriculture, biodiversity, and ecological balance. Educational panels on bees were also erected around the estate. Attendees included Italy's Agriculture Minister, the President of the International Federation of Beekeepers Associations, and a group of young students. The Japanese animation studio, Studio Ghibli, has been awarded an honorary Palme d'Or on Monday at the 77th Cannes Film Festival. Goro Miyazaki, the son of the famed founder of Studio Ghibli, Hayao Miyazaki, received the award on behalf of the studio, thanking the audience during a standing ovation following a screening of 4 new short films written and directed by his father. Hayao's son, Goro Miyazaki, is also a film director and the creative development director of the Ghibli Park. Studio Ghibli also won this year's Oscar for Best Animated Feature in March for the animated film The Boy and the Heron. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. So the provinces got a taste of summer yesterday, but today the heat arrives for western regions, with temperatures rising to as much as 28 degrees here in Seoul. Meanwhile, East Coast regions remain breezy, with temperatures in the upper teens throughout the day today. We had some foggy and cloudy skies to start off the day in the capital area, but more sunshine should be rolling in as the day goes on. That UV rays will be very high for most of West and Jeju Island today, so please use your sun protection items wisely to protect against overexposure to the strong sunlight. Back to the ratings now. Afternoon highs in central regions are 1 to 7 degrees higher this afternoon at 28 degrees here in Seoul and over in Daejeon. Meanwhile, Busan and surrounding areas noticed much cooler highs, topping out at just 22 degrees Celsius. A dry advisory is in place for the mountainous regions of Jeju Island. Early summer weather continues through the week, with nationwide rain in the forecast on Sunday, possibly into next Monday. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
Right, and those are the headlines at this hour here in Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session, and today we address Korea's minimum wage. Do stay with us.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
A commission consisting of delegates from the government, business and labour has kicked off its first debate to decide on next year's minimum wage. So what are the prospects of Korea's minimum wage hitting above the 10,000 won mark next year? How does Korea's rate of rise in minimum wage in recent years compare to that of its counterparts? And what are the prospects of different minimum wages based on different industries? Welcome to Tuesday's edition of Issues and Insiders. I'm Min San-hee. Discussions over the minimum wage here in Korea for next year are underway. And for more on these talks, I have Senior Research Fellow Oh Ki-taek at the Korea Labour Institute live on the line. Dr. Oh, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Right. I also have Kwon Swal with us here in the studio. Swal, welcome.
Hello, Sunny. Good afternoon.
Right. Swal, first, do tell us a bit about the members of this particular commission and the method in which the minimum wage is set.
Sure. So the government enacted the Minimum Wage Act in late 1986, and a year after, the Minimum Wage Commission was set up to review, discuss, and decide on the country's minimum hourly wage on a yearly basis. And then the minimum wage system was launched in 1988. The commission is composed of 27 members, 9 people each representing employers or business, employees or workers, often the major umbrella labor union members, and the public interest or the government. The purpose is to promote the healthy growth of the national economy by ensuring the level of salaries for workers and consequently improving the quality of work and workers. So for some details on the progress, the Labor Minister has to make a request regarding the minimum wage by March 31st each year. Upon that request, the Minimum Wage Commission must submit the minimum wage for the next year within 90 days. It might seem like sufficient time at first sight, but it takes numerous debates, votes, and objections from the workers and employers, with last year 15 general meetings having been held before they came to a conclusion. The wage is then finalized by August 5th, and starting on January 1st, the next year, the new minimum wage is applied. Now, today, this Tuesday, the first meeting on next year's minimum wage has been held with a number of hot potatoes. Will the symbolic 10,000 won or $7.35 US threshold be broken or not? Also, will minimum wages be applied differently for different industries?
Right. Now, Dr. Oh, as my colleague Soa just mentioned, there appears to be much interest in whether or not the country's minimum wage for next year will surpass the 10,000 won mark. What would be the implications of Korea's minimum wage surpassing this particular mark? And what are your thoughts with regard to this reality, Dr. Oh?
I think there is a big symbolic difference between less than 10,000 won and more than 10,000 won. Korean minimum wage is already 9,861, and it would exceed 10,000 won if it is increased by more than 1.4% this year. Korean minimum wage has been increased 5 to 7% during 2011 and 2017 period. There has been big increase of 19.4% and 10.9% in 2018 and 2019. After that, it was 2.87% in 2020, 1.5% in 2021, and 5% in 2022 and 2003, and 2.5% this year. Considering these trends of Korean minimum wage increase, next year minimum wage is more likely to exceed 10,000 won, whether when other things are equal. However, there is some chance that other things are not equal. For example, if Korean Minimum Wage Commission decide to differentiate the minimum wage by industry, then there is some possibility that next year minimum wage increase rate is quite different from previous trend of a minimum wage increase.
I see. And before we touch further into the possibility of different minimum wages for different industries, so what more can you tell us about the rate of rise in Korea's minimum wage in recent years, and how does it compare to that of its foreign counterparts?
Well, at times Korea's minimum wage jumped year after year, and at others you could barely feel the increase, and especially when considering the real wage. So let's take a look at this graph here. Now, Dr. Oh briefly mentioned it, but the current minimum hourly wage is 9,861 or $7.24 US, which translates into a monthly pay of a little under 2.07 million won or $1,514. That's a 2.5% increase from 2023, the second lowest increase since the system was introduced. In 2021, we see a mere 1.5% raise, mainly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2018 and 2019, we see huge hikes of 16% and close to 11% from the previous year during the Moon Jae-in administration, which had pledged to surpass the 10,000 won mark. Now, that pledge made by almost all presidents, though. Now, if we compare Korea's minimum wage to that of other countries, among the OECD countries, Korea's minimum salary was the 13th highest. Now, that is according to figures as of 2021, though. It's roughly half of the US and a third of Denmark. But if we make a comparison to our neighbor Japan, Korea's minimum wage this year is higher than that of Tokyo. Now let's convert the won into yen here. 1,086 yen in Korea versus Tokyo's minimum wage of 1,072 yen. Now Japan applies minimum wage by region, and given the high living costs in the capital Tokyo compared to other places, Korea's wage could be said to be relatively high.
Right, I see. And now then, Dr. Oh, as you touched upon earlier, this year talks will center around the possibility of different minimum wages based on different industries. I understand there's quite a bit of dispute regarding this issue between business and labor groups. First of all, what are their concerns?
The issue of minimum wage differentiation by industry has been debated in Korean Minimum Wage Commission since 2 or 3 years ago. The concern of employer association is that the current Korean minimum wage is too high for some industries, especially industries with low added value are hard to pay minimum wage for workers because these industries are less likely to create profit enough to pay minimum wage due to low added value. They insist that Korean minimum wage level is relatively high if we look at the trends of percent of less than minimum wage. This percent of less than minimum wage is the proportion of labor market participants who would get less than minimum wage when the next year's minimum wage increase is decided. This percent of less than minimum wage is in 2023 is 13.7%, and it is increased by 1% compared to the last year. Especially the percent of less than minimum wage of agriculture is 36.6%, and accommodation restaurant is 31.2%. Therefore, Korean Employer Association demand that it is necessary to introduce minimum wage differentiation by industry. On the other hand, labor unions object to minimum wage differentiation by industry. They insist that minimum wage differentiation by industry would be contradict the meaning of the minimum wage to prevent quality degradation of the labor force by setting minimum level in which vulnerable working class can manage to live minimum level of life.
Right, and perhaps there's evidence of the concerns by labor groups. So I understand a recent report shows over 3 million workers here in the country are being paid lower than the minimum hourly wage. Do tell us more.
Right, Sunny. The Korea Enterprises Federation released a report in which it looked at how many people are being underpaid or paid less than the legally set minimum wage. Now, the latest figure is based on the 2023 minimum wage of 9,621. So, as you can see, more than 3 million people did not receive that amount per hour last year. That's 13.7% out of the total workforce. In the past years, you'll see that the number especially was high following big hikes. If you remember earlier, I mentioned how 2018 and 2019, there were huge jumps in the minimum wage. So we see how around that time and beyond, we have more than 3 million people who are not paid the set amount. But last year, given that there was a very small increase in the minimum wage, the 3 million people seems to be a concerning figure. The situation differed a lot depending on occupation. Over 43% employed in agriculture and fishing industries did not receive the minimum hourly wage of 9,621. Around 37% of workers in lodgings and food industries were paid less than that as well, while on the other hand, the rate stood at a much lower, roughly 2% in plumbing and waste disposal industries, as well as science and technology industries.
Right, I see. Dr. Oh, speaking within your capacity as a scholar, what are your thoughts on the presence of different minimum wages based on different industries?
Personally, I think the Korean minimum wage rate is not that low in global standard. Therefore, we think about some breakthrough for Korean minimum wage institution. I think the minimum wage differentiation by industry would be one method of a minimum wage reform. However, it is not desirable to differentiate minimum wage by industry less than overall minimum wage, because there is a possibility that that kind of differentiation of a minimum wage has a risk to incapacitate the meaning of the minimum wage institution. Other countries, like Japan, differentiate minimum wage by industry, but more than overall minimum wage. So they decide the minimum wage as low as the minimum level of wage, and some industry with relatively high ability to pay can decide the minimum wage level of that industry only. It is the higher than overall minimum wage level. By setting the minimum level relatively higher than overall minimum wage level, those industries are more likely to induce workers with relatively high quality and competencies, and then more likely to improve competitiveness of those industries.
Right, indeed. So there is one option then. That is one option, of course. So pundits, in the meantime, believe that a hike in minimum wage may actually dampen employment prospects as well. Do share those thoughts with us, including the reality in other countries, of course.
Well, for employers, especially small business owners, minimum wage hikes are really not welcomed. Finding it more and more difficult to pay their staff, in many cases part-time workers, some stop hiring and try to make ends meet on their own or with family members. In fact, around the time the announcement for the 2024 minimum wage was made, there was an explosion of inquiries for one-person store services, as well as an increase in purchases of integrated solutions like kiosks for ordering. Industry watchers said more and more business owners are adopting one-person store solutions to ease the burden of labor costs and save operational resources. So that is why in some sectors a drop in jobs is reality. The correlation between steep minimum wage hikes and declining employment is also an issue overseas. In California, a new $20 minimum wage resulted in the loss of many jobs in the fast food sector. Pizza Hut, for instance, cut more than 1,200 delivery jobs in December. According to Wall Street Journal, more than 77,000 people lost their jobs in the 3 months leading up up to the end of the year after the state of California announced its new minimum wage act last September. Now, to reduce to reduce more labor force, a chicken fast food restaurant in New York City also adopted a virtual cashier program via Zoom. So the combination of minimum salary increases and the availability of technology as well as artificial intelligence may impact jobs even more. And also, I don't know, Sonia, if you saw in Korean restaurants these robots that start to serve as well, right? So I think these factors combined could be an issue for these business owners when we continuously increase the minimum wage.
Right. And staying with that then, Dr. Oh, what are your thoughts on the relationship between minimum wage hikes and employment trends?
In general, there is a negative relationship between the wage and employment. Therefore, there is a high possibility of negative relationship between minimum wage and employment. However, the minimum wage is somewhat different from other kinds of wage institution. Therefore, we need some special consideration on minimum wage level. The minimum level, wage level, is one method of maintaining purchasing power of a vulnerable working class. If the life level of a vulnerable working class is too low, it has negative impact on economy and the labor market. Therefore, many countries try to increase and maintain some life level of a vulnerable working class, and the minimum wage institution is the very typical way of this method. In addition, if a higher minimum wage increase demands of the domestic goods and service, it would have positive impact on the competitiveness of the company, and finally, companies would increase employment. Therefore, it is hard to say about the effect of minimum wage on employment as a general term. It would be decided by the mechanism in which minimum wage increase has impact on economy, confidence of company, and the labor market.
Right, so many factors are in play here then. Meanwhile, so what are the tasks ahead as Korea awaits the decision on next year's minimum wage?
Well, as I mentioned briefly before, the first session of the Minimum Wage Commission just took place today with already discrepancies existing, with the Labor Circle demanding a significant increase beyond 10,000 won, which would require at least a rise by 1.42%, and management seeking a freeze. Narrowing the differences, as well always, is the task ahead, but also discussing whether an increase by sector is needed or not. So we are expecting a tug of war. It may be one of the most difficult months of discussions. And pundits also have been pointing out for a long time the need to improve the process of making the decision itself, as no one seems to be happy in the end, while it takes weeks of battling. Now, based on the 90-day review, the Commission this year must finalize its review around late June. But as I said before, in some cases it takes more than 10 meetings. I think last year it took 110 days until they reached a final conclusion. So we will have to see whether the debate will be even more fierce than last year.
Right. And that being said, Dr. what do you propose perhaps for a satisfactory outcome from this latest minimum wage discussion among the government, business and labor?
Negotiation of minimum wage is not an easy task, especially nowadays economy is not good, and then price index is high. In this situation, the minimum wage negotiation would be much more difficult than other situations. The employee side would emphasize that economic situation is not good, and therefore we need a low level of minimum wage increase. On the other hand, the labor side would emphasize price index is high, and therefore we need to increase minimum wage very much. As a matter of fact, both sides' contentions are not long. Even though economic situation is not good, but the price index is high. Since now we are in the stagflation situation, we need more energy and effort to deal with the minimum wage negotiation. However, since the minimum wage is one of the most important labor market institutions, we have to develop more delicate method of negotiating minimum wage, including formula-based negotiations.
Right, and in the meantime, I suppose, as Suo mentioned, we're looking ahead to a bit of a tug-of-war this year as well then. Dr. Oh, thank you so much for your insights today. And Suo here in the studio, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you, Sunny.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends Tuesday's edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.
Korea. Some people call it the country of Taekwondo.
People are more interested in Korean culture and other aspects of it, and one of those things is Taekwondo.
Surtout, ne commencez jamais le Taekwondo, parce que si jamais un jour vous commencez, vous ne pourrez jamais vous arrêter d'en faire.
아, 정말 이렇게 제 인생을 좌우할지는 정말 몰랐어요. 왜냐하면 태권도의 나라, 한국에서 태권도를 하고 싶어서 한국에 처음 왔는데 지금은 13년째 살고 있습니다. 태권도 이런 무술입니다.
저는 사실 한 달만 하고 포기할 줄 알았어요. 근데 너무 재밌어요.
What I really like about Taekwondo is that it doesn't only give you the physical abilities, such as like flexibility or strength, it also gives you the mental abilities.
I love the spirit of Taekwondo. It's great martial arts with a lot of respect, a lot of values. Also with the pumse, very beautiful techniques. It's a sport that it's a martial art that you can practice from 7 to your old age.
I've never seen them be so committed to anything if they've played other sports, but nothing like this before.
Especially when like two very little kids are fighting, because it's really fun to watch.
So it's a great way for all of us to do this together.
I'm gonna keep doing Taekwondo until this becomes a black belt.